I bought the saddest lemon tree in Brooklyn on a Wednesday in May because I had 20 free minutes and a coupon that was about to expire. The tree stood in a dented tin pot near the register of a small hardware store on Smith Street, half hidden between a display of bright extension cords and a stack of mop buckets. Its leaves drooped like tired eyelids. The handwritten tag said, "Meyer Lemon, loves sunlight," which felt like a dare in a city that turns sunlight into a rumor. I touched one soft, dusty leaf and it clung to my finger, and I thought, fine, me too. I also loved sunlight. I paid $29, tucked the tree under one arm, and pushed out into the afternoon like a man who knew what he was doing. I did not. The wind knocked the pot sideways in the first block. Soil spilled into a comic gray crescent on the sidewalk, and I tried to scoop it back with the store's flyer. A brown dog on a skate leash sniffed the roots. A guy in a Mets cap called, "Hey, farmer," and gave me a thumbs up that felt both insulting and warm. The tree and I limped home together, me hugging the tin like a drum, the pot bumping my thigh. My apartment was on the third floor of a narrow building that looked like it had been squeezed by bigger buildings on both sides. The fire escape faced a brick wall with a polite slice of sky. I set the lemon tree on the little iron landing and turned it like a satellite dish, trying to aim it at courage. Inside, my place had the hush of a library after closing time. I worked days at a print shop on Atlantic Avenue, full of hum and ink and tiny urgent decisions. Matte or gloss, half-inch border or bleed, but at night the quiet felt heavy. I boiled pasta. I scrolled through the same 3 apps. I listened to the upstairs neighbor practice violin and wished him joy. The lemon tree gave the room a soft citrus smell that wasn't really there. I think my brain added it like a soundtrack. I told myself I'd water it on Sundays, talk to it on Tuesdays, and check for bugs whenever my mind needed a small, useful job. The first week, the leaves perked up. The second week, a single white flower opened like a small bell. I stood over it with the dumb pride of a new coach watching a team make one decent pass. The blossom was so clean it looked fake, and there was a sweet smell after all, the quiet kind you only notice when you lean over and commit. I told the tree it was doing great work. Out on the fire escape, I had to scrape pigeon gifts off the rail with a spoon, and I built a low fence from wooden paint stirrers to keep the pot from sliding when I moved around the grill. I also Googled, can a lemon tree survive New York, which was like asking if a penguin could minor and dance. The internet said maybe, with patience and blankets and a self-esteem that borders on delusion. I read late at night and bookmarked articles with pictures of smiling people who'd managed a single lemon in December, holding it up like a trophy. People started noticing. Our mail carrier, Mrs. Grant, rested her hand on the pot when she climbed through the building to the back, her thick glass frames fogging from the stairs. "Meyer?" she said, not even looking, and I nodded and felt 10% more official. On Sunday mornings, an older man I'd seen washing his Buick on the corner, Mr. Alvarez, pointed up with his sponge and shouted, "You'll want to pinch the flowers early." I nodded again, even though the idea of pinching anything on the tree felt rude, like interrupting a good joke. I bought a tiny bag of soil that cost a ridiculous amount of money and a spray bottle that promised misting magic. I realized watering was not just pouring until it overflowed and apologizing. It was a steady rhythm. I stuck my finger in the dirt as if checking a cake. One hot afternoon, I carried the lemon tree into the kitchen for what I called a spa day. I wiped the leaves with a damp cloth. I mixed coffee grounds into the soil because a blog told me coffee made acidic friends. I turned on the radio to a station that played old soul songs, because it felt like a leaf would like Aretha. When I put the tree back on the fire escape, the upstairs violin paused, and the player leaned out and said, "My mom had one of those in Miami." He was 20, maybe, with messy hair and the good kind of awkward confidence. "Good luck," he added, like he was handing me a spare bow. By then I'd named the tree, though I didn't tell anyone. I called it Bright. It sounded like a request more than a fact. Every night, after the last bus sighs and street arguments softened into whispers, I would slide open the window, step onto the iron landing with my cup of tap water, and ask Bright how it was doing. The city breathed on. The plant stayed still. I could feel both of us wanting more light than we had, and doing our best anyway. The summer became a map of tiny victories. A new leaf here, a thicker stem there. A neighbor kid asked if lemons grow with stripes. I told him no, but in my head I whispered, "We'll see." In August, a thunderstorm cracked the sky like ice in a glass and drenched us both. I tilted the pot to dump the saucer and laughed out loud when a small green knob appeared on a branch the next morning. A baby lemon, bold as a button. It was smaller than my thumb joint and soft like someone's first try. I guarded it. I checked it before work and after dinner, and once at 3 a.m. when a siren woke me. If it fell, I decided, I'd pretend it wanted to travel. If it stayed, maybe I'd make a single glass of lemonade, the ceremonial kind. I could picture it, a crowded glass with ice, the first sip sharp and patient. I didn't know yet that the story wasn't really about the lemon. It was about the door I'd left open without meaning to, the one that let other people step onto my fire escape and say hello. In September, the weather softened and Bright seemed to exhale. I learned the rhythm of my block the way you learn a friend's laugh. The deli on the corner dragged out a table for chess. The barber shop put a radio in the window that shared every conversation twice. I missed a train one morning because I stood too long with my hand on the pot, feeling the cool tin and telling myself that if something living could change shape this slowly and still arrive, maybe I could too. New York moved around us, fast as a river, and I held a cup of water and waited for a tree to drink. I could explain it to no one, and yet every day someone found me and tried. By October, I had a rhythm that made sense only to me and the lemon tree and, somehow, the entire block. If I stepped onto the fire escape with the spray bottle, Mr. Alvarez would lift his chin from his folding chair and shout weather forecasts with the authority of a man who has known 1,000 skies. "Wednesday is the first cold snap," he warned, and I dug a thrift store blanket out of my closet to drape around the tin at night. The upstairs violinist, his name turned out to be Evan, started using my kitchen window as a backdoor between practice breaks. He'd lean in to see Bright, tuck a curl behind his ear, and tell me about his teacher who said every song is just air moving in a kind pattern. "That's all this is," he said, pointing at the tree, air that decided to wear green. I told him that was the best thing anyone had said all week, and it was. The mail carrier began leaving notes. Good color, on a sticky in July. Strong stem, in early fall. The notes stuck to my fridge like small stamps of approval. People asked for updates in the stairwell, at the laundromat, on the sidewalk when I took the pot down to wash the saucer. "How's your lemon doing?" came from a barista who knew my name only as the oat latte guy. I like that. I liked being the lemon person in a city of specialists. It made my life less about the next rush and more about the long, slow trick of waking up to the same small task. In a format I understood, I was building a print run of days, layering ink, letting things dry, aligning edges. Every morning when the light slid between buildings, I misted Bright and watched the tiny fruit swell. It turned from lime green to a quiet, thoughtful yellow, as if it were deciding what kind of day to have. I started to leave the window cracked open, even in the chill, because the smell of the cold air made my coffee taste truer. In early November, a flyer appeared on our front door announcing a block association meeting in the basement of the church on Hoyt Street. I'd never gone to anything like it. That night, I walked over with my hands in my jacket pockets and sat on a folding chair that wobbled. There were cookies that tasted like someone's aunt had made them with a heavy spoon. We talked about trash pickup, the eternal recycling rules, the barbershop radio, and whether the new cafe could put bistro tables on the sidewalk without trapping strollers. I kept my mouth shut until an older woman with a silver braid down her back said, "We need more light on the block," and laughed at her own pun. She introduced herself as Ruth and leaned toward me. "You're the lemon boy," she said. "You'll understand." I did. When the first real cold arrived, it felt like a hand pressed against the window. I'd read every article I could find about wintering a lemon tree in a northern city. The advice had the tone of someone describing a long-distance relationship that might work if you believed in miracles and owned a humidifier. I bought a cheap set of outdoor string lights and wound them around the pot to give a gentle, constant warmth. I wrapped the tin in an old sweater. I made a clumsy frame from paint stirrers. Those stirrers did heroic work all year. And a sheet of clear plastic, my very own greenhouse that looked like a science fair project. I whisper-sang encouragement. "Hold," I told Bright, like I was a coach in the last minute of a game no one was watching. In December, the baby lemon was almost ready. It had the color of a school bus and the firmness of a good handshake. I decided on a date for the ceremonial glass, the shortest day of the year. It seemed right to set sweetness against darkness. I wrote the plan on a sticky note and put it on my fridge, solstice lemonade. I pictured filling a jar with ice, slicing the fruit, and inviting whoever happened to be around to take a sip. The idea cheered me the way a clean shirt cheers you in a week of rain. I started telling people. Ruth raised her eyebrows like she'd been waiting for this all her life. Mr. Alvarez offered his folding table. Even the barista promised a jar of simple syrup. Then January decided to be loud. The forecast turned black and blue. A cold front pushed down from somewhere that sounded like it had no vowels, and the radio flung around words like polar and blast. The Block Association group chat, the one I joined without meaning to, lit up. "Plants inside tonight," someone warned. I looked at Bright and then at my narrow kitchen and tried to picture the pot on the linoleum. The building had rules about hallways and plants and anything that could trip a person carrying groceries, but rules slouch in a storm. After dinner, I put on 2 sweaters and a hat and stepped onto the fire escape. The air had the thin edge of a knife. I could taste metal. I unplugged the string lights and felt the temperature fall like a joke that lands hard. "Okay," I told Bright. "Field trip." Evan appeared at the window in socks. "You need help?" We lifted the pot together, tilted it through the window like we were sneaking a ship into a bottle, and set it on 2 folded towels. Soil dusted the floor in the shape of a small continent. I could hear wine banging the dumpster lids out back. The radiator hissed with its old anger, then warmed like a friend who complains before doing you a favor. I filled a bowl with water and set it nearby to add humidity. I shook my head at my own seriousness, then added another bowl for extra seriousness. I taped a note to the inside of the window. "We'll go back out soon. Promise," because it felt polite to inform the birds. I sat on the floor next to Bright, knees up, and watched the plastic greenhouse crackle as the heat rose. The storm went on all night. I slept on the couch with my hat on and woke to a room that smelled like someone had run a citrus peel under the faucet. The lemon held. So did we. By morning, the block looked like a painting done in 4 colors: gray, white, darker gray, and 1 stubborn stripe of yellow from the bodega sign. I made oatmeal and texted the group thread a picture of Bright indoors. Hearts and thumbs up flew back like confetti. Mrs. Grant replied with a weather map and the words, 2 more nights. Then mercy. I kept the tree inside until the cold retreated, checking the soil with my finger, warming my hands on the tin, listening to the building hum. When I slid the window open again and eased the pot back outside, my breath made ghosts that had the nerve to be pretty. The city creaked and stretched. The air smelled clean like a fresh page. The solstice lemonade had to wait, but only a little. It was mid-February when the fruit gave quietly, the way a plan becomes a day. I twisted, felt the tiny snap where stem meets air, and held the lemon in my palm. It had small freckles and one odd dimple, like a wink. I set it on the counter and just looked at it for a minute, the way you watch a friend finally step through a doorway they've been standing in for months. Then I walked to the deli for ice. The guy at the register, who had never once called me by my actual name, said, "Hey, lemon," like he meant it kindly. When I got home, I washed the fruit under cool water, and the skin lit up like it remembered a summer I didn't. I sliced it. The smell lifted over the sink and made the whole apartment brighter. I squeezed the juice into a glass with ice. I added a little sugar and stirred with the handle of a wooden spoon. It wasn't a lot of liquid, barely half a glass, but it shone. I took the first sip, standing by the window. It was soft and tart and not at all heroic. It tasted like keep going. The plan had always been to share, so I texted the thread and propped the front door open with a sandbag. Mr. Alvarez carried up his folding table like a trophy. Ruth arrived with thrift store mason jars and a smile that took up her whole face. Evan played a few gentle notes on his violin, something that sounded like a greeting. Mrs. Grant came on her lunch break and stood in the doorway with her scanner, grinning, like the mail could wait 5 minutes. We poured the lemon into a pitcher, added water, and then, because math is real, added a splash of store-bought juice to make enough for 6 small glasses. No one complained. We clinked mason jars in a circle in my narrow kitchen, and the block felt small and tall at once. The sweetness was thin but clear. The ice clinked. Ruth closed her eyes on her first sip and said, "That's the taste of patience." We took the folding table to the fire escape and set the empty pitcher beside Bright. The city was still winter, but the light had changed gears. You could feel February forgetting itself. I tucked the string lights tighter around the pot. A bus passed, and a small wave of warm air reached us like a promise mailed early. People walking by looked up, confused, then smiled when they saw we were doing something kind and harmless. Nobody asked if we had permission to celebrate one lemon. No one measured. The point wasn't the fruit. It was the way the tree had turned us into a chorus. I'd started the year waiting for more light. Somehow I'd made some. Or maybe I'd only noticed what was already there and held it up for others to see, like the reflective triangles they give to crossing guards. Either way, it worked. The tree kept teaching me in small doses. When a second fruit formed, I didn't become greedy. I became curious. I learned how to let go of what I couldn't control, clouds, wind, upstairs footsteps, and focus on what I could, water, patience, showing up. I started taking the longer route to work to pass by the community garden on Bergen Street. I'd stop and watch a man in a Yankees jacket talk to his tomato plants like they owed him money. I met his eye one day and said, "Meyer Lemon," and he nodded like I'd told him a good story. I like the way gardeners understand each other without needing to trade big words. It felt like a calmer version of New York, one where our daily hustle lined up with something green and quiet. Spring returned as if it hadn't been gone at all, and Bright exploded with blossoms that made the whole fire escape smell like a polite bakery. I pinched a few, just as Mr. Alvarez had advised, and didn't feel rude anymore. The violin from upstairs learned a new song that sounded like two people finally matching steps. The barista started keeping lemon slices on the counter in a little glass bowl, and if you were the lemon person, you got an extra free. The Block Association held a cleanup day, and we found a lost earring, a damp deck of cards, a plastic dinosaur, and 6 different kinds of hope. When the trash truck took the pile, we cheered like we'd won something. Maybe we had. By summer, there were more fruits on the tree than I deserved. I took what I needed, one for my water on a day the heat pressed back, and left the rest to do their slow work. Sometimes I'd sit on the fire escape in the evening with a book and not turn a page for 20 minutes because I was listening. The city talked in car doors and sneakers, and a baby's laugh from across the street. The lemon leaves made their tiny clicking sound in the wind, like pocket applause. I thought about how small my apartment had felt the year before, how sharp and private my days were. I hadn't moved. Nothing dramatic had broken and been rebuilt. I'd just chosen a living thing and let it anchor me to other living things. I understood finally what Evan's teacher had said. This was air moving in a kind pattern. On a Sunday in July, we had another little party, not for any reason except that the light was long and the ice tray was full and the city had decided to be gentle for a few hours. We sliced lemons and cucumbers and played a card game on the folding table and told the kind of stories you only tell when you trust that the listener will hold them like glass. At some point, Mrs. Grant said, "This is what people mean when they say neighborhood." I nodded. I thought of the day I'd carried a dented tin pot down Smith Street, sweating and worried I'd made an odd choice. Maybe I had, but I liked the way the choice kept choosing me back. I liked the way a tree can teach you to slow down and move forward at the same time. When the sun slid behind the buildings and the first porch lights came on, I stood up, stretched, and checked the soil with my finger. It was dry. I fetched water. I poured just enough. Bright drank. The city breathed. And for a long, simple minute, all of it fit.